Good morning. Continuing our journey in Hemshech Samach Vav, the adventures of Hemshech Samach Vav. We are on page, I got it right. Yeah, we're on page 38. Fourth discourse of the 61 discourses of this long Hemshech. You say this is the fundamental one at that, discussing, if I could make the headline, it would be the two states of consciousness, which is our usual routine usage of our faculties, which is the thing we're most familiar with, and that's subject to changes, to gradations, to diminishments, as we'll discuss in a moment. And then there's the gili of etzem and nefesh, your core essence, which an example for that is during a simcha, a special celebration. It just elevates you to another state of being, expanded state of consciousness, and affects all your faculties equally. Another manifestation of that is tshuva. Tshuva touches a person to the core. Tshuva amitis mu'umka deliba, a true tshuva from the depth of the heart, is not a compartmentalized one time or one location effect, like a koyach, like a faculty. It affects the entire person. And as we learned it in detail, he explained it as he summed up the whole topic. He said, "Bizgalus b'chinas atzmus haneshama in tshuva haru me'ira b'chol ha'keiches b'shava." That radiates and impacts all the faculties, and he brings the proof because you see by that his whole being is transformed, like you see by Baal Tshuva Amiti. Interesting, the word Amiti. In other words, there's a Baal Tshuva that's not Amiti. Not that it's a false Baal Tshuva. It means a full Baal Tshuva, someone who's really done it completely. So he says, and he goes through some of the faculties, the things he desired, that he desired, and he craved for or lusted for. Before, now, it's gone to the other extreme. Now he desires and craves for godliness. And he doesn't even have an interest in those things. He's no longer interested in desiring that different lifestyle or different choices of that he did earlier. And it's b'teikif yeser, and it's very intense, his desire for godliness. Because negeya lo ya'inyan ma'od. It's not just he made a choice. It have touched him at the core. He fundamentally, at a core level, has changed his perspective, and therefore what he desired before is no longer a priority. Now what the priority is the opposite, is godliness, kedusha. So and what does he crave? All matters of divine and godliness that earlier, in his previous state, he did not feel at all. Just reading from middle of page 38. And then he goes to koyach haseichel. And not just we're talking about his intelligence change that he's learned now about Judaism, or he's learned about God. His perspective, very perspective, and his very axioms and assumptions have changed, as he elaborates and we discussed yesterday. And I gave examples for that. So all the koyches are mishtanim, and then he goes, same thing with the midas, and every midah, chesed, gvura, so on, is now with a new level of intensity. And also nasir b'peil, that even ma'isa mitzvahs he does with take of gadol, ma'od, b'ribe chayis. So obviously there's a change that before he didn't do those mitzvahs. But now, in addition to the regular performance of mitzvahs, he does it with more passion and more vitality. And then he explained that in Rosh Hashanah, Semei Tshuva, that's the way it is by all Jews. The Kiyum HaMitzvahs is with more intensity than throughout the year, as an example for this. But here is specifically talking about Tshuva. Okay. Then comes, and now he goes back to comparing it now to the koiches gluyim. Remember, there's two tracks. This is etzem nefesh affecting the person at the core level, and that in turn creates they call it a global or all-encompassing transformation. But in the beginning of Giluyim the neshama, mashameir ba'keiches. When we're talking about the Giluyim of the soul, not the etzem of the soul, the Giluyim, meaning the revelations, the expressions, the manifestations in a form of defined impact. In other words, like sunlight as opposed to the sun itself. So here, meaning like the light of the neshama, here since it's a reflection or revelation, here it is subject to changes and levels. It doesn't affect everything equally, and every koyach diminishes as it evolves from the nefesh all the way to the expression, to the revealed faculty. Simply put, if you're touching since I use the sun as an example, the etzem of the sun, meaning the very body of the sun, is always the same way. The light of the sun travels. It travels. When you're closer to the sun, it's going to be a lot hotter and brighter. When it's millions of miles away, let's say on Earth, it's much more diminished, and that's why we can survive. We wouldn't be able to survive if we were too close to the sun, because the ha'ara of the sun, Oir, is subject to gradations, as we learned earlier as well with Oir Ein Sof. That once it's Oir is by definition levels, because Oir means expression, and expression is in the world of structure, and structure goes level by level by level. So that's what he's saying now in the Koiches HaGluyim. And to explain it, he actually mapped out the process of using one koyach HaSeichel. So it begins with the koyach HaMaskil, the power to conceive. That's in the superconscious state of the nefesh. That's where the koyach HaSeichel in the nefesh, that's the ha'ara from the nefesh. It's not etzem nefesh. That's why it's called koyach HaMaskil. It's the power of intelligence coming from the soul. It has to come from the soul, it doesn't come from the body. But it's still in a state where he says it's not yet seichel. It's ein beginnes mehusim etzir seichel klal. Okay, it's the well spring, it's the source. Then that is revealed in koyach hachachma in a flash, a spark of an idea. Reishis gili ein beginnes seichel gali, and it's called barak hamavrik, like a flash of lightning. Why is it like lightning? Because it's not yet miyushav. You can't say it's settled, it's integrated, internalized in Kalim. It still somewhat hovers, but it's manifest. Something has been revealed. There is a tangible and conscious concept that the person has conceived of. It's not tfisa dayin. So even though he knows the idea, but he knows it in general, it's not yet internalized. Why? He says because what dominates in chochma is the oir of the seichel, the spirit and the soul, so to speak, and the concept, not the very structure of the concept, not the seichel of the concept, not the intelligence of it, but its spirit. He says the oir shel seichel, lebchinas hasichli mamish, as we discussed as well, and that's why he doesn't grasp it yet. To put it into words, to put it into letters and words. The gili is the oir and not the sichli. Then comes next stage. Doesn't call it bina, but it's pretty clear that it's going into the language of bina. Nekudas haskola de hasoge v'havona. Well, havona is bina. It comes into comprehension and understanding, and now it is coming into words. Now it is coming into the seichel is now taking on parameters and structure. It's just like you come up with an idea and then you tell your assistant or you tell your second in command, I want you to take this idea and flesh it out now in detail. The idea itself, why can't you just share the idea? Because the idea is too amorphous. It's too abstract because it's more oir than keli. Now the oir gets diminished. He says these words. So now it's coming to hasaga. So bottom line is, the more it comes into details, the more the spirit or the energy of the oir of the seichel is more, the more it is diminished. And I think this is the last thing we learned. We actually see palpably that that when you understand the idea, the so-called spirit, and the energy of the idea gets more concealed, and you don't feel it as much. What you feel more is the logic of it, the rational, the reasoning, and the intelligence around it. Yeah. So what is the main point of all of this? That ha'ara from the nefesh, in contrast to etzem nefesh, does not come unfiltered. It absolutely goes through stages. The etzem expresses itself and affects the entire person, like we said, hazaza, it shakes up the person at the core, let's say tshuva. The same thing, simcha, that we learned earlier, and affect all the faculties equally. Equally meaning, obviously, each one in their world, but all of them are affected. Whereas the faculties themselves, in the conventional functioning of a person's daily life routine, the faculties go through all these stages. So basically, when the etzem is essentially like a surge from the source, and that will, like we learned earlier, will open up new channels of intelligence, for example. In a regular process of intelligence, you don't see that. We're going to see how all this comes together, because remember, it's through Aveda down below that we touch the etzem. And Giluyim, like Gan Eden, and in this context, in the human being, Giluyim is more what we were born with and created with. Yes, it's part of Avodas Hashem al pitam v'das, and we have to go through these steps. But the etzem nefesh is a unique experience, and that's ultimately the highest place. But you really want to have both, as I've pointed out many times, the etzem begili. But we're going to get back to that once we finish this particular topic, as he continues to explain it. But remember, taanug is still a central theme here. You remember, l'chol tichla isi kates, was he now interpreted, doesn't just mean tichla, everything in the finite structure of existence has a beginning and an end. Tichla from the word taanug, because taanug is the driving force that drives all these faculties. And there's the taanug in its source, taanug atzmi, which we are not discussing right now, we're going to get back to. And that is the taanug, how it manifests within the faculties. And there too, he said, it's a ha'ara. If you go back at page 36, when he began the topic, the einig meir b'kol ha'keiches, u'mekol mokem hashem meir min ha'einig b'keiches rak ha'ara levad. So even though einig itself is connected much more to the etzem nefesh, but that einig comes out during a time of simcha more intensely from the core, or tshuva. But in the conventional structure of our usage of our faculties, it's only ha'ara of the einig. And now he's going to explain that in this context. So just like seichel goes through stages from the koyach hamaskil to the chochma, then to bina, and it goes through diminishments, more less keli, more keli, less or more diminished I should say. So now he continues, and that's what will continue. So like 3, 6, 9, 10 lines from the top, or 11 lines. Page 39 is where we're up to. I said before 38, we're on 39. The line that begins Misalim, and you can follow along if you want to follow the text and don't have the sefer, the book, at samachvav.com. Okay. And just as we explained that seichel itself, and every faculty is that way, it goes through these different stages. So too with the taanug that radiates within seichel. Remember, seichel is connected to taanug. Firstly, person uses seichel that gets pleasure, but seichel, we learned earlier that taanug translates, if you remember, we took the example of building a home. You have a taanug that you want to have a home. And then that translates into the gzeres hachachma, the wisdom of building a strategy, how you build this home. So there's a taanug within the seichel. Hine nekudas askola, the b'chinas barak hamavrik meir b'gili ha'einig yeser. When you're talking about a chochma, the nekuda of the askola, that first flash of lightning, barak hamavrik, when it just emerges into your consciousness, there einig radiates and is much more powerful. Ha'einig yeser. Why? Because that moment, like when a person, let's say, is struggling with a dilemma, and then suddenly you have an aha moment, an epiphany, even if you haven't fleshed it out yet, that moment, there's a certain pleasure, certain satisfaction that a person reaches. I don't know if I'm sure you've had these situations where you've been struggling with something. I'm using struggling. It doesn't have to always be a struggle, but you're not clear about something. And then there's a moment that you suddenly realize, I think I got it. Now, it's still not developed. It has to still be fleshed out. But that moment has a lot of power in it because it's the direct connection between basically chochma and keser, or chochma and the koyach hamaskil, and ultimately taanug. Pnimius Abba, Pnimius Atik, we learned the connection between Pnimius of Chochma and the Pnimius of Atik, which is taanug. So that moment has a unique, like a flash of pleasure. The flash of Seichel is a Einigeser Kamoi. He gives an example from the Gemara. It talks about Rabbi Lazar. It says, Tzovu Ponav Shel Rabbi Lazar, Shemotza Tesefta Chadata. So the Yerushalmi tells us, and Medrash, the footnotes give you the sources. Rabbi Lazar's face lit up. Tzovu means like from the word Zahav, actually, Tzovu, like it lit up, it brightened. It was like an aura. His face lit up when he found a new Tesefta, meaning he found a new manuscript. Well, I don't say manuscript, he found a new Tesefta that he had not seen before. Tesefta Chadata. He found a new Tesefta is a new section of Teresh Vav P. So part of it is called Tesefta Chadata. As such, because it was new, he suddenly lit up that excitement, that pleasure that comes when you like discover a new thing that you haven't seen before. Imagine learning a topic that you're familiar with, and then suddenly someone shows you something you've not seen. So there's a certain intense pleasure at that moment. It's not necessarily because of the seichel of the Tesefta. It's not what it says in there. Once you learn it, obviously it'll be the details will come across, will come out, and you'll be able to appreciate the whole idea. But the mere finding of it, that means like the mere flash. Here, as I discovered something like that, creates a tzovu panov. And the pleasure is from the etzem, not the details of the seichel. By contrast, once it comes into comprehension, and you start studying it, that level of pleasure is not there as much. That intense pleasure. There's still pleasure, obviously, when you understand it and you learn it. But that moment of discovery, similar to when a concept falls into your mind, has a certain surge of taanug that's more than the taanug in the hasaga. Okay. Now he's going to qualify and ask, of course, and even though we know that atik, which is taanug, we know it's revealed in bina. So it's of course also in chochma, obviously in chochma, but also in bina. I'm just looking at the footnote. Okay. That means in bina becomes more felt. You feel it more. But the primary gili of taanug is in chochma. So let me explain what that means. When you have, sometimes there's pleasure, can be pleasure that over a period of time, so it becomes more internalized. And you still have pleasure. But it's hard to compare that to the first moment. So let's say, I always give the example of a reunion between two people who love each other. You love your child. He's been away at school for many months. They come home. That moment when you hug and see each other, there's something that's incomparable to the intensity. Now, that doesn't mean you don't continue to enjoy the presence of being with your loved child. And it continues. But now it's more murgish. Now it's becoming more, I don't want to say settled, is not the right word, like miyushav, but it's becoming something that is more become regular. So it doesn't have that intensity. But the ikar is galus of taanug is in chochma. And in bina, because you understand the idea, like when Rabbi Lazar started learning the new Tesefta, he continued to enjoy because he was now learning and understanding whatever it says there. But there's something about discovering, or in the context of chochma, the concept falls in your mind, it's right close to the mouth of the well, so to speak, to the source, to the source code. So there's that, what he calls the ikar is galus of taanug is a chochma. Now that doesn't mean in bina there's no taanug. But taanug and bina, the focus is more murgish, just like more words, more explanation, more fleshing it out. Same thing with the taanug. And a chochma, the ikar taanug, like we said earlier, is an etzem oyer shemeir, the very core thing that something is shining, without not necessarily what is shining. Like someone say, why did Abba Elazar's face shine? So why did it begin to glow? Why did it that thing? Because not because of a specific idea that he learned, the mere discovery of it. Ubabina taanug al asichli levad. So now he explains it a little more. Not just murgish, so he says, bina, the taanug is on this, is only on the intelligence within it, which also has a taanug. You enjoy and taking pleasure in what you're learning. Whereas there, by chochma, it's more in the etzem shemeir.
Can you take a question?
Not middle. Let me finish, and then we'll take questions. V'nimtza. So what do we derive from this? What do we take away from this? The gili era nefesh b'chlal, that the era nefesh, as the nefesh reveals itself or expresses itself, v'chen gili enig b'frat, hu enig b'shava b'chol ha'keches. So the gili era nefesh, where you talk about the keches geluyim, he's now summing up what he began. And also gili enig b'frat, what we just discussed, enig and chochma and bina, it's not equal. They're not equal in all the faculties, as he just specifically. And the power of chochma and the faculty of chochma, it's more the revelation of the enig than the koyach bina, or the revelation of the seichel of the koyach, the eira seichel of the nefesh. Let me just see. Okay, I can stop here for questions. Yeah.
So my question was what you just explained, that the I don't know, the experience of oneg is stronger in chochma than as it works its way through bina and further down the midos. Is that how shall I say, because there's some parallel structure, concept of connecting with something atzmi. I'm not saying it's like it's atzmi like. It's not atzmi per se, but it's a sense. It's the notion that the sechel and chochma in particular is connecting with something that is more essential, even when it doesn't.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
In other words,
not what he's saying here. Here's like I said, sunlight. Once you're dealing with the structure of existence or the structure of a human being, it's subject to this process, a process of diminishment and diversity and hierarchy and higher and lower. That's all he's saying here. He's not going further than that.
But wouldn't you say the experience is more intense and therefore more essential?
Intense doesn't mean necessarily atzmi. You could have in Giluyim faculties that are stronger than others.
But isn't it fair to say
intense doesn't mean intense is simply takeoff. That's all.
I hear. But I guess let me refine my question.
I mean, why are you pushing this? Why do you have to go there?
Because I'm trying to understand if there's something embedded in the structure of the metaphysics of it that now interpersonally
knows that he's talking about atzmi. He's going to get back to atzmi. You'll see plenty about atzmi. He spoke about it before. Right now, he's not talking about it. He's talking about koiches geluyim. He's not.
Okay. Let me reframe it. Let me reframe it then. Last chance. Last try. Chochma is closer to that which is a keser, and keser is closer to etzem.
So what? But that's not what he's saying here. That's even if that's true, it's not what he's trying to say here.
So once it's begilui, it's begilui. That's it. It's not like you can't have like it's more atzmi even though it's begilui.
It's
It's
not what
either
he's
or.
saying here. It's a discussion, a separate discussion that
Uh,
has validity, but it's not what he's saying here.
I
It's
see. Oh,
possible, but it's not what he's coming to say.
I see. Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
And thing I'll add that's very important to emphasize. Lifnei at tzimtzum and after the tzimtzum is fundamental difference, paradigm difference. The kav is subject to these giluyim that we spoke about, higher, lower. Before the kav, there is no ma'ilo mata, like we learned. So to say, for example, that the higher level of a kav is closer to etzem than the lower level of the kav is questionable. Because you could say everything after the tzimtzum has now entered the domain of finite. Everything
Yes.
is now in the state of finite.
Gradation.
So you could argue the exact opposite. But I'm not going to go into it now because it's a whole other discussion where the chochma has in it, in this nakuda that it has, does it have an element of atzmi? It's really going to only be confusing at this point.
Fair enough. Thank you for at least
Okay.
understanding my question. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? So now he's going to add one more point in this context of gradations and levels. He says another thing. V'gam, additionally, ha'enig shebechochma b'chinas barak hamavrik. The enig and chochma in a state of like a flash of lightning, that flash that we discussed, hurag be'esh nefalei hamsa. It's only the moment that he has the epiphany, that this concept, this hamsa, this new theory, so to speak, or this hamsa, this idea, this concept has arisen in his mind. Ukeshenisiyashin ma'at. Once time passes, nisyashin literally means when it gets older, means not at the immediate moment. As time passes, ma'at, nifseka enik shaba. That intense pleasure that you had at the moment of the epiphany, at the flash, is nifsik, is pauses, or is interrupted, or it comes to ceases. That's in the hamsa of chochma. And for sure, the einig in the comprehension of something, nifsik b'ma'at zman. In a short while, in a short time, it also is nifsik. You don't have the same einig as time passes in anything you understand. While you're learning it and you're really appreciating it, of course you have a certain measure of taanug. But you also see as time passes, either you're learning it for a long time or because you've moved on to another topic, that taanug is then recedes and doesn't have the same intensity. There again, you see shinuyim. So in addition to what he said before, that there's a difference between how the nefesh radiates and einig radiates, a chochma and bina, each faculty is different. Even the faculty itself, time has effect. In other words, even the chochma, the moment of the epiphany is different than a few moments than afterwards. And the same thing during Asagit. While you're understanding it, as time passes, the einig recedes. Moving. And from all this we understand, going back to the initial point, that the reflection or the expression of einig, that nimshach in the keiches gluyim meaning, not the einig as it comes in tshuva or simcha and so on, is only ha'aras einig. It's only a reflection of that pleasure. And thus it's subject to all these changes and shifts and diminishments. I see in the footnote they refer this idea that Rebbe Rashab spoke about in Seif Maimorim Tofresh Mem Zayin, much earlier years, and there he brings from Teres Chaim. So if you're interested in looking up more material on what we just learned, it's in Teres Chaim. He says the mimer called Lahavin Shereshin and Pesach Hamatzah, and he gives you the exact page numbers. So again, this new edition has the advantage that you can actually find all sources for everything we're learning in case you want to look deeper into any particular topic. I do that often, especially when something's not clear, or just to get more details or more context. Okay. Okay, I'll stop again for any questions because now he's going to go into Aveda, explaining this in Avedas Hashem. Does anybody have any questions?
Since you're mentioning the footnotes, we've talked about it many times here in this newest edition of Samach Vav. I mean, this is a tremendous amount of knowledge that a scholar must have, or at least a group of scholars must have in their minds when they read Samach Vav. It's not. I mean, sometimes the Rebbe will give his own citation, but it's not that common. And here we have hundreds of footnotes. Is it that this Hasidic scholars? I mean, you're a master. It's hard to imagine someone who somehow says, "Oh, that idea, I saw it over there in that mimer," and that's nice to have once in a while. But they're doing it like almost every material point. They're citing a source, or if it happens to have been said somewhere else, or even by the same Rebbe. Like who?
Some of us are. What can we say? We have mastered most of Chassidus, if not all of it. Yeah.
Jeez, it's unbelievable.
Why? You're an attorney.
Yeah.
How many law books have you in your mind?
Well, honestly, I know more how to find things than what I have inside my head, to be honest with you.
Okay. Sometimes that's also true in this case, Lahavdil will say. You don't always know exactly everything at every moment, but you easily can find it because you know.
You're familiar with the terrain.
Yeah, like there are people who are Baki B'Shas. Now, if you think about it, it sounds like amazing for someone who's not. But if you add it up, it's only that many books. It's not like infinite amount of books. And my point is, I'm using a secular example, but when you go to school, I'm talking about the good parts of school. You're supposed to master hundreds. A doctor, how many medical journals and books have they read?
Yeah.
And so people who are masters of their topic, a real master knows not just he has a better understanding. He has a scope, an amazing breadth of knowledge about the
body.
topic.
A body of knowledge.
I mean, you ever hear? Real geniuses are really good in physics or in, for that matter, history. They start quoting every detail. It's because it amazes us because we ourselves are not there. But in areas where we do have expertise, you could get a taste of it. Let's put it that way.
And there isn't really any cross-referencing except for like Sefer Arachim, which itself wasn't finished. There aren't that many indices.
That's not where the people who are masters don't get it from encyclopedias. They get it because they learn the material itself.
Okay, thank you for sharing. It's really quite amazing.
But if you went over to a Rav, who's a real knowledgeable person, and told him, "I'd like you to tell me everything you know about Pesach," how long do you think this conversation would last?
A lifetime. Yeah, a long time.
Right. And he wouldn't look at any book, but he studied all his life, so he could start going through all the laws of Pesach. I mean, it's like So the bottom line, the mind, if you apply yourself, you could tell me there are not many people who learn Chassidus in that manner. That's true. In other words, you're not going to find thousands of people who can just quote every mimer from the Alter Rebbe through the Rebbe about any topic. But there are those that can.
When you were real quick, sorry, I don't want to digress, but we don't. Real quick, when you were a choser and the Rebbe was giving over whatever mimer or sikha or whatever, and you wanted to, I understand when you were hearing it, you were a blank slate just to absorb it. But then when you're writing it down, you want to make sure you're getting it exactly right or whatever. Did you then consult other mimering or sources just to be able
Sunday, before I even began writing one word, all of Sunday was research and looking at the sources.
I see.
I didn't begin writing till Sunday afternoon after I went through all the sources on the topics that he addressed.
Wow. Amazing. Thank you for sharing. That's really cool.
And that's why you look in every sikh, you'll see footnotes upon footnotes. Those were done by myself and my team.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So
Thank you.
everything the Rebbe said had to be annotated, just like here.
Mm-hmm.
So the Rebbe said something, we had to look it up. Sometimes it was very obvious, I knew exactly what, and sometimes I had to search.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't always, it's not like
Obvious.
I could say,
Yeah.
that there are many times even here, I'll share something I know, and then sometimes I have to look up that thing with a gzeres chochma. I went
Mm-hmm.
and actually found that the sources written here are not, I already told them, the editors, that that's the wrong sources.
Wow, cool.
They look very quickly. They just found something similar, but there's a whole other place where it talks about it the way he discusses it here. So it's not just finding it like, if you go to ChatGPT and it's put in, let's say, oineg in chochma and bina, yeah, it'll find you like almost like in a dumb search, wherever it says oineg chochma bina. But an intelligent search, meaning someone who knows this stuff, is going to know which place is primary and which is not.
Understood. Thank you for sharing. It's really cool.
Okay. Are there any questions about what we've just learned about these gradations? So now he's going to talk about it in Aveda. He says like this: "Ukamoikein hu ba'aveda." And so too is it in Aveda, in service. Aveda literally means service, but it usually means Aveda Hashem. And that's how Chassidus calls it. There's Haskalah, there's Aveda. Haskalah is the concept, Aveda is the application in our service. The Kishmizbain be'eze is bananus belakus. And that's why I always say, let's wait till we see the whole topic, because you'll see sometimes the Avodah can help understand the concept much better, because he's applying it. So he says like this: when someone contemplates on any divine contemplation, in Elikuz, b'gedulas ha'erein sof baruch hu, in the greatness and the superiority and the supremacy of erein sof baruch hu, the infinite divine light, umispol ba'ava v'yira, and he's excited. It stimulates. He gets excited. He gets aroused, stimulated with love and reverence. Bizgalus halev, meaning it's not the concealed love and reverence in the heart, but actually it's revealed. He senses a feeling of love to godliness because he appreciates this higher state of reality. Or it could be that the Avavir is still concealed or covered up in the contemplation, because what's predominant is the contemplation, not so much the feelings that it aroused. So basically, it's two different ways that it can be, or two steps, if you wish. And he's taking pleasure in understanding this level of alakus. Like even here, we're learning here about etzem, giluyim. So there's a pleasure in what you're understanding. This process of contemplation, which is faculty of seichel, and the emotions, which is the faculty of midas, chochma, chesed, gvura, ava, yira, is only a reflection, only an expression of Erein Sof Baruch Hu. It's not the etzem. You're talking about the divine manifestation, how God manifests in existence, whatever level you're contemplating on, whether you're contemplating on the tzimtzum or the kav, or ak or atzilus or bria, or the spheres, or the parsoyas, the partition, whatever it is, you're contemplating on the divine manifestation in existence, not on divine etzem. Ukiyadua, the kol hasoga hi berichuk mina etzem dafke. And as it's known, interesting to see what footnote they write on that. Okay, they take in other maimorim of the Rebbe Rashab and the Frierdiker Rebbe, that every comprehension, by definition, when you comprehend something, it means it's distant. Hu berichuk mina etzem dafke. It means you're already distant from the etzem itself. And I'll just give a physical example, and then we'll go back to how it is in Elikus. I've talked about it many times. You're standing in front of a beautiful natural wonder, right? A waterfall, or the Grand Canyon, or whatever it may be, and you're in awe of it. Or you are seeing a beautiful painting, or a beautiful, whatever it may be. Or you're listening to mesmerizing song that's completely captivated you. That's not hasaga. That's the experience. I'm not going to call it etzem mamish because I don't know if we can call it etzem, but as far as that particular piece of art or song or natural wonder, the etzem of it is the experience of it. As soon as you start understanding it and say, let me analyze it, let me explain it, you're already moved somewhat away from the very experience itself. Just a simple example to understand what he means that hasag is berichuk. Because you could say, what do you mean? Hasag is understanding that etzem. What's wrong with understanding the etzem? Because etzem is not about understanding. That's already, as we've discussed, an expression, definition. You're breaking it down, similar to what we said before about chochma and bina. Then the chochma, the oir haseichel, it's the spirit of the idea. It's not the details of the idea. Of course, the idea has details. Of course, this piece of art or this natural wonder, you can break it down and say, how did this waterfall form? Who created? Who's the artist? Who's the composer of the song? You can analyze the very song itself, what kind of structure it has, etc. But that's not the etzem of the song. The etzem of the song is the sentiments, the feelings that it evokes, and how it actually captivates you and transports you to another time and place. So someone will say, what is that? That's the experience of the very song, the etzem hanigin. It's not an analysis and understanding of it. So he's not saying here there's no value in understanding it. He's just explaining that the comprehension of something is richuk, is distant from the etzem. So it's obviously we need both because that's how we internalize it. Imagine you could have both. It's like the difference between riyah and shmiyah. So we say the same thing, riyah. When you see something, you don't have to understand it for it to affect you. You saw it, it has a certain hisamtus, a certain resonating element, to the point that you can never deny it. When you hear something, someone tells you what they saw, yes, it could be more details actually, because seeing, you don't necessarily see every detail, you just see the big picture. When you hear about it, you can actually break it down into details, but it's not going to have the same effect, the impact that seeing it. Instead, if you saw it, it's a whole different experience than just hearing about it. So it's Riyah and Shmiyah, like Reuven and Shimon. And both are necessary. One is more internalized and something that we can relate to. That's the Shmiyah, that's the detail, the Hasaga. And then the Riyah is more Hisamtus. It's more of a resonating truth of, wow, something like that. And again, that doesn't mean there's no taanug in the bina and the Hasaga. It's just more richuk from the etzem than the etzem itself. So he says like this now. Okay. So now taking it back to Elokus, when you're contemplating ungodliness, whatever it is, he says, so both the contemplation and the pleasure that it brings on are all ha'ara. The atzmius ein sof less machshavet tfisa beklal. Because the core of Ein Sof, we have a statement, Zohar says, no thought can grasp it. So as soon as you have a thought, you understand you're not grasping it, you're grasping a reflection of it. And what does radiate in our comprehension, it's only a reflection, only an expression of it, not the thing itself. But keep in mind, ha'ara does not mean, should not be minimized. It is a reflection of the etzem. It's not a reflection of something else. But it's still a reflection. Okay, now we actually bring in riyah, and even that level that we say in chochma itself, there's a level of the vision of riyah, which is even a deeper level of resonance. So now he's going further, that even the riyah of chochma, we're there, it's more than bina, like we said, but atzmus ein sof does not radiate even in the level of riyah of ein sof, of Vaharaya, and he brings proof to this. Say, how do you know? Maybe it does. Maybe it is radiating. It says Vaharaya, Shari Moshe shoy b'chinas ma de chochma. Moshe, who actually has in his name mem shin hey mem hey ma v'nochnu ma, he was the level of ma of chochma, because chochma is koyach ma bittel. Remember, chochma consists of two parts. Koyach is more the faculty, relates more to the seichel of it. Ma relates more to the what was that? The wonder of it. So Moshe is ma of chochma, the bitl of chochma. Like it says about him, v'nochnu ma. Uksiva va'ish Moshe anov ma'od, and it says Moshe was the humblest, very humble, meaning it's all a state of bitl shahari. Shayibchin is bitl atzmi de chochma. Wasn't just bitl, a bitl atzmi, a core bitl of complete self-nullification and suspension of self of chochma, which is the highest level of bitl in all the faculties. Chochma ma'ayin temotzi, say chochma is bitl. Umakol mokim, and though is that level of chochma and a high level of chochma, bikish hareini noch es chveidecha. He asked Hashem in the famous parsha in Kisisa, show me your glory, show me your face. V'hishivu, and Hashem responded to him, lo sucha lires, you cannot see my face, because like he said, lo sucha lires, lo yireini adam v'chai, a person cannot see me and live. But you will see my back, upanai lo yiro, but my face you won't see. This is all Pasha Kisisa. So what do you see from this? That even Moshe's chochma, atzmus ein sof, he cannot see. The mashem is galad b'chinas riyah, the chochma ain't b'chinas atzmus. That what's revealed even in the riyah of chochma is not the atzmus k'moshehu, as it is. It's somewhat of it's a chayrai, which again is a reflection of. It's the back, which is an example for something you don't see it directly, you see it indirectly. And from all this, we understand above how it is in Lamaila. From this, the example he gave now in Aveda, the Bechinas Ha'oris, Erein Sof, Shemer Be'eses Spheres, that Silus, Hurak Ha'ora Ba'alma. That the Ha'ora of Erein Sof that radiates in the 10 spheres of Atzilus, which correspond to the 10 faculties of the human being, is only Ha'ora Ba'alma, is only a Ha'ora. It's only a reflection of, an expression of, manifestation of, the different words you can use, an extension of, which of course aligns very much to what we've been learning earlier about Gan Eden and Eden. Remember he said Eden, he said, is the etzem. Even though there he said Eden is primius chochma, ayin lo rasa, so we still have to qualify how do you explain that in this context. So you have to say that primius chochma is one won't be revealed till osad love. So even Moshe is not that level of Eden, because he said even Moshe ayin lo rasa, just qualifying. So that's a higher level in chochma itself, which I don't want to get into right now. It's part of the discussion where chochma, where giluyim reach to the etzem, can they or can't they? Right now, the key thing is to keep these two tracks separate. There's etzem, there's ha'ara. There's very high levels of ha'ara. Never minimize chochma's power. You're talking about Moshe Rabbeinu, the highest possible level, where it says later in the Torah that ponim beponim, that he saw God face to face, which also needs to be explained. How do you reconcile that with this? But that means there are levels in ponim, obviously. But the point being here is that there is the ha'ara, which is not etzem. It's one step beneath it. And we'll see where this is going to go. He's not finished. This is all coming to explain, if you remember, Chol Tichler, Yisi Kates, Einig, and Keiches. What we are getting is a bigger picture, not just in the cosmos, but also in our faculties. The difference between etzem and giluyim, Einig, and the other faculties. And another thing that needs to still be clarified as well, we've talked about it before, but I will discuss it later when he finishes this, is Einig etzem. Right now it seems like Einig is, Einig, we say taanug atzmi aposhet, that Einig relates to the etzem. But is Einig one step away from etzem as well? So we'll get to that as well. We'll talk about that as well. Just I will say that Einig is the closest thing to etzem, that's for sure, an expression of the etzem, whereas the other faculties are not. But we have to also distinguish between Einig and etzem hanefesh and Einig l'mayla, Einig and atzmus. So all that will be discussed. Even if you may have questions about that, just be patient. Any questions before I continue?
Yeah. What would be a good definition in English for etzem? Is it essence?
I use if you're using one or two words, I use core or essence. If you explain it more, you have to distinguish between atzmus or muhus. You're talking about God, or you're talking about etzem nefesh. So even though they have some things in common, but it's obviously different because etzem nefesh is ultimately part of who we are. So I don't. If you really want to understand it, I think you need more than just a few words. You need to explain giluyim and say it's nothing that we can relate to because everything we relate to in existence, the mere fact that we're relating to it already tells you it's a form of expression. That's why when you go there, you have to qualify by saying you can't really talk about etzem. You can only like experience it like when you're in the zone. Like water, the etzem of mayim does not feel that it's wet. It's just a state of being, like we talked about
Right.
a number of times.
Yeah.
So that's why when you so that's why I'm careful. So when you say core and essence, and you don't qualify that, so someone says, "Okay, I got it. The etzem of the tree is its is the inner part of the bark. I'm sorry, is the inner part of the trunk of the tree, and the giluyim of the tree is the bark and the branches and the leaves. That's correct. That's correct to say that everything has an etzem and everything has his pashtus or giluyim. Like for example, you'll say, what is the core infrastructure of a human being? It's not arms and legs. It's DNA. It's cellular. It's on a very, very, very the basic. What are the basic building blocks of a computer program? Is zeros and ones, and the giluyim is how the zeros and ones become. We'll call it user interfaces that we can then press a button, but it's really generating something from the core. That's when you speak in terms of explaining it in very practical terms. But if you're talking about atzmos, or you're talking about etzem nefesh, there you have to go with a different type of mindset, where you really want to talk about something that does not express itself in zeros and ones. Everybody can relate to, even though we don't see them. But okay, it's invisible, but it's behind the scenes. But here we're talking about an etzem that is not defined by, like he said, bilti mischalik, bilti mispashit. That's what he said from the Rambam. It's not divisible. It's indivisible, and it doesn't express itself. It's hard to find examples for that because everything in this world is divisible and expresses itself. So that's why you need to start going to a different way of thinking. You follow what I'm saying?
Yes. And is it like we have our thoughts and then we're aware of our thoughts? Is that the awareness behind?
Yeah, awareness is definitely a gilui. And when you're not aware of yourself, like I mentioned before, when you're so mesmerized by a song, you ever like listening to a niggin and everything disappears. Like literally, you become so much part of it. You could cry, you could laugh. And then afterwards you say, what happened? What just happened? Why are you saying that? Because you lost yourself in an experience. That is, I don't want to call that etzem, but it's a taste of something that is not defined by experience. It just happened. That's where you have to find examples in our lives. It's moments of tremendous joy, tremendous seamlessness. Psychologically speaking, I would say people are able to go there, find tremendous healing there, because you're not conscious of yourself. All self-consciousness disappears. Defensiveness, all insecurities and fears. In a way, it's like Adam and Chava before Chet Eitzadas. They didn't even feel they were naked. Why were they not ashamed? And they got busha, lo yizbaishu. Why did they get busha? Because they were not conscious, like a child. Why should a child be conscious about its sexuality? God created you. Your body's perfect, beautiful. It's only when you become self-conscious you start saying, oh, I have this part of my body. I have this part of my body. And this is tempting. This is pleasurable. This is not. What's happening is your consciousness and awareness is actually a part of your being separate from the etzem, if you really want to define it. That's why it's called Eitz Hadas, Teverah, that now they know Teverah. Before they also knew there was Teverah. They knew there was right and wrong, but they didn't experience it. Once they experienced it, then they became like in a way separate, where Hashem says to Adam, Ayeka, where are you? Where's your etzem? Where'd you go? You've now become like, I don't feel that you're one with me anymore. You're not aligned with me. So in this context, I'm speaking about it more psychological because it's easier to explain. But in the language of the Chakrim, they talk about the Daled Yesodis, and they call there's the Yesod Hayuli Ha'atzmi. So if you're familiar with that, that also could help. But
what does that
some
mean?
words of explanation.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, the example of tshuva and simcha, it was really work well because, like I said, you could, every person, I'll just use an example in, let's say in relationships. So a husband and wife, or any two people who love each other, and something happens between them, so they can find a way to remedy it short term, like a Band-Aid, an apology, you make up. But then there are things that are fundamental that you need a shake-up at the core. Talking about tshuva. So there are Avedas, for example, that Hashem says, here's the tshuva you do on it. But that tshuva amitis, what he's talking about, deliba, requires a whole shake-up, your whole being. It's like I talked about before about trauma and other things, that it's a shake-up at your core that changes your whole being, your whole paradigm, your whole perspective changes. So that's the difference in an atzmizdik experience and a giluyim experience. Giluyim experience happen all the time. We're constantly learning new things. We're fixing things. We're repairing things. But an atzmizdik level of is when it happens in a comprehensive way that affects the whole entity.
And giluyim is chochma.
Chochma is the beginning of giluyim, yeah, and bina, and that's where there is, like he says, stages, right, one level after the next.
What?
And to contemplate from Hashem, right? It comes from chochma, or it could come from chochma, or it could come from a higher level.
Well, chochma is receiving from a higher level, but chochma is the first step because it's the beginning of the concept that you're contemplating on, the first flash, the first seed, and bina develops it. But that seed does come from a place that's super conscious, koyach hamaska, like he said, yeah.
When you're talking, I'm sorry, Mr. Lefkowitz, did you want to continue asking questions?
No, thanks.
No. Rabbi, when you were answering his questions and you referred to the Dal Yesodos, in some sense you were trying to get it, you were explaining definition of atzmus, but Yesodos necessarily, it seems like it's expressions, gilui. So what's the connection? I mean, the foundational,
if you go to the
foundational
topic,
expression.
I only refer to it for those that are familiar with it. When you go to the topic, you'll find there's the Dal Yesodis, Eish Ruach Mayim Ofer, right? Fire, air, or wind and earth. But then in the Sfarim that talk about it, they say there's a called Yesod Atzmi, Heyuli Ha'atzmi. That is a fifth level. That's the etzem of all the four Yesodis.
I see.
In other words, the four Yesodis would be four elements, and then there are molecules, and then there's the subatomic structure.
I see.
So you say the atzmi, it's called. So there, it doesn't have, like Eish Ruach Mayim Ofer, even if they're not physical, but they're archetypes, but there are four different archetypes. One is dry and hot, one is wet and moist, etc.
Right, yes.
Whereas the Yesod HaAtzmi, there's a lot of discussion on this. In a little while will be Pesach. In the Haggadah, we talk about the 10 makas. We just finished learning about it in the Parshas. So you may remember right before Dayenu, after we spill out the wine on the makas, we talk about the different opinions, whether these 10 makas were 40 makas or 50 makas. So the commentaries explain, because the question is, how deep did these plagues penetrate when they affected the klipa of Mitzrayim? Does it only the dollar you say this, and 4 you say this times 10 is 40? Or did it also touch the core klipa and the core evil of Mitzrayim? And then it's 5, the fifth Yesod as well. Yesod Atzmi times 10 is 50. So there's a beautiful...
This is new to me. Where is it being mentioned? In which places?
So there's a very beautiful sikha from the Rebbe where he talks about this at length. The difference between the 40 and the 50, the 4 and the 5. That's just one place.
The Yesod Atzmi.
That's what he talks about. That's why I would go to that sikha, and there'll be plenty of footnotes there.
Where is that?
Say the Atzmi, Rab Sadia Gaon, Amunas Videus, a few other places.
Thank you.
Ramban, in the beginning of Chumash Bereshis. Look in that sikha. That sikha will send you to footnotes that will give you. It's very easy
Where
to
is the
find.
sikha?
A boy sikha. Why don't you look it up in ChatGPT? It's a sikha on boy. I think in Chelik, one of the 16 or 20, 23, not 23, 26.
Where he talks about Yesod Atzmi?
21. Talks about all the Dal Yesodis and the Yesod Atzmi. It's just an example for those that know it. If you don't know it, it may just confuse you, but you can look it up there.
Thank you.
It's not confusing. It's a major thing.
Okay, so I gave you a few clues. Do your homework now. Search in the indexes. Okay, we'll stop here. We'll read the bottom of page 39. Yeah. Bottom of page 39. So we'll stop here.